Someone, help, someone, help. When I went to my in-laws' house for the holidays, I heard a faint voice from the garden calling for help. At that moment, I had a bad feeling. The house was unnaturally quiet, and my mother-in-law and brother-in-law, who were supposed to be there, were nowhere to be found. I went out to the garden from the front door to check the source of the voice, and there I found my mother-in-law tied to a doghouse with a dog collar. What? No way! How did this happen? I had a fight with David the other day. It was a pretty big argument and it seemed to have settled down, but he tied me up while I was sleeping and forced me here. When did this happen? 3 days ago. Let's get this collar off right away. However, the collar was fixed with super glue and couldn't be removed. This is terrible. Why would he do this? Wait a minute, I'll get something to cut it. I went into the house and brought scissors, managing to cut the collar and free my mother-in-law. I've seen my brother-in-law mistreat my mother-in-law many times before. I never thought he would go this far, and I felt compelled to protect her. This is unbelievable. Mom, you should come live with us. With my father-in-law gone, I'm the only one who can protect her now. When I said this, I got an unexpected response. You are no longer part of this family. What? After talking with my mother-in-law, I found out that my husband and brother-in-law had done something to me that I didn't remember. The details were shocking, but there was more turmoil waiting inside the house. My name is Rebecca, I'm 46 years old, and I'm a housewife. I met my current husband after graduating high school, when I started working at a machine parts factory. We dated for a year and got married when we were 20, and had a child the following year. After taking maternity leave and returning to work, my husband's job performance skyrocketed, leading to rapid promotions. By the time he was 30, he was in charge of an entire factory and was promoted to factory manager. I decided to quit my job and become a full-time housewife. Travis is really motivated. Who would have thought he'd become a factory manager at 30? It was quite the talk at the company. It's only natural if it's to support the family. I have to work hard. Nicholas is already 9 years old. He'll be going to middle school, high school, and college. We need to save up for that. I had no dreams when I joined this company after high school. I want Nicholas to find something he loves. For that, we need money, and I want to support him. My husband had thought it through. He had no dreams himself, so he wanted our child to live with dreams, and he had been working hard for that. Travis, that goal of yours is like a dream in itself, isn't it? I think it's wonderful. I'll do my best with the housework, so let's build a great family together. At that moment, I realized how strong my husband was. His strong desire to protect the family came through, and I was sure we could keep working hard together. What are you doing here after so long? Come to complain again, Travis? Whenever we visited my in-laws after getting married, my brother-in-law, who was a freeloader at the in-laws' house, would always start something with my husband. He always bragged about his prestigious college degree, constantly reminding me of his superior intelligence, and honestly, I was getting sick of it. What's your problem? I'm not complaining. Since Dad hurt his leg, it's been tough every day, right? Mom's doing all the housework, and having a bum like you around must be a nuisance. It's time you moved out. What did you say? A high school graduate like you has no right to talk back to me. I can't believe someone like you even managed to get married. It's infuriating. Can you two stop fighting the moment we get home for the holidays? Why is it always like this? Shut up, you old hag. Your inefficient housework drives me crazy. Stay out of this. You're not a kid anymore, so stop acting like one. We have kids, and this is a bad influence. Just stay in your room. Whenever we visited my in-laws, these sibling fights would happen. The cause was always my brother-in-law, who couldn't stand that my husband, whom he considered beneath him, was married. Moreover, he couldn't stand my mother-in-law's clumsy, scatterbrained personality and would always mock her, getting frustrated at her actions. David, you better know what's coming if you don't knock it off. Just because I hurt my leg doesn't mean you can disrespect Lucy like that. I won't tolerate it anymore. Back when my father-in-law was healthy, he would get furious and even violent when my brother-in-law insulted my mother-in-law, once leading to the police being called. Because of this, my brother-in-law often belittled my mother-in-law only when my father-in-law wasn't around. However, my mother-in-law, knowing that my father-in-law would always defend her, would report everything to him, ensuring he would scold my brother-in-law. Visiting my in-laws was always like this, so I disliked my brother-in-law, and so did my children. I don't like Uncle. Why is he always angry? Does he just stay inside all day? He acts so high and mighty without doing anything. My brother-in-law didn't like my son either, who was always outspoken during our visits, making my brother-in-law retreat to his room with a sour expression. I couldn't tell if he didn't believe in hitting children or just didn't like them, but he clearly didn't know how to handle my son. As my son grew older, he started to have dreams, just as my husband had hoped. I want to be a lawyer, so I'm gonna work hard. He said this out of the blue in middle school and started studying diligently. His grades improved steadily, and he went on to a high school, then a university with a law school, passed the bar exam, and is now an intern at a law firm. I was amazed at my son's ability. Nicholas, you're amazing. You're really working hard to make your dream come true. Just like Travis, you're so determined. It's really surprising, isn't it? I never thought Nicholas would become a lawyer. He's almost officially a lawyer now. Once his internship is over, he'll be registered. It felt like everything was going well for our family. That's why I thought I might start working a bit too. Seeing my son become independent and work towards his dream inspired me. And I started helping out at a local farm where they were looking for part-time workers. But around that time, my father-in-law was diagnosed with cancer and hospitalized, but it was too late by then. He passed away 3 days after being admitted. Is it really so sudden? I wanted him to stay with us longer. My mother-in-law leaned on his lifeless body, crying. Despite the painful situation, my brother-in-law was smirking. Uncle is creepy. Mom, make sure to watch over Grandma. It'd be terrible if something happened to her. My son shared my thoughts. He came over and whispered to me. Yeah. I have a bad feeling, so I'll try to visit her more often. We promised each other that day, but despite my efforts, the worst happened. After my father-in-law's death, my husband was also worried about his mother, so I, being free to do so, would visit her occasionally to check on her. Rebecca, I'm sure David will treat Mom terribly now that Dad's gone. I have a bad feeling, so please try to visit her as often as you can. With my husband's encouragement, I started visiting my mother-in-law, who was almost alone, and having tea with her. Maybe because of this, my brother-in-law had started leaving her alone. Recently, it seems like your brother isn't bothering your mom as much, probably because I've been visiting. I reported to my husband and he responded happily, but his expression seemed cloudy. He began to appear deep in thought, and I noticed him sometimes talking to someone on the phone in his room. Hey, you've been looking gloomy lately. Are you okay? I'm getting worried. Oh, I'm fine. There's nothing to worry about, really. He reassured me with a gentle smile, but I remained uneasy. His behavior was more suspicious than usual. Is he really okay? Why does he need to keep so many secrets? When I started doubting him, the only logical conclusion was an affair. Even though his actions were noticeable, I didn't want to believe it. Hey, Rebecca. I need to ask you something. Can you listen? What's up? Why so serious? Can you go to my parents' house alone this year for the holidays? I have something to do and can't go in the morning. I know there's my brother to worry about, but can you handle it? I'll try to get there as soon as I can. My husband said this with a serious expression on his face. There must be something important. Sensing the importance, I agreed. About a week before the holidays, the farm where I worked got busy, and I was engrossed in harvest work. As the busy season ended, the next day was the day to visit my mother-in-law. I'm sorry. I'll try to get to my parents' house as soon as possible, so please take care of my mom until then. Worried about his mom, my husband had said this the day before. I was also worried about her since I hadn't been able to visit for a week due to the busy season. I decided to go as early as possible the next day. But when I arrived, there was no sign of my mother-in-law in the house. Even more, I couldn't sense my brother-in-law, who usually stayed in his room. Where on earth had they gone? As I pondered at the entrance, I heard a faint voice from the garden saying, "Someone, help, someone, help." Fear gripped me, but I decided to go to the garden and see who it was. To enter the garden, I had to open a fence. It had several large trees that my father-in-law had meticulously cared for, and I had to climb over the wall to see into the garden. In the farthest corner of the garden, behind an old shed, there was an abandoned doghouse where we used to keep a dog. I saw something in its shadow. When I peered in, I was shocked to see my mother-in-law tied to the doghouse with a dog collar.
What? No way! How did this happen?
I had a fight with David the other day. It got pretty heated and eventually settled down, but while I was sleeping, he tied me up and forced me here. When did this happen? 3 days ago. I was horrified by her words. To think that he had left his own 80-year-old mother tied up outside like a dog for 3 days. In front of her was a dog bowl with dog food, and it seemed she wasn't even allowed to use the bathroom properly. Wait a moment, I don't want to do this, but I need to take a picture. This will be evidence when we file a complaint. I said that, took a few pictures of my mother-in-law tied with the collar, and ran to her side to remove it, but it was glued tightly with super glue and wouldn't come off easily. This is terrible, why would he do this? Wait a moment, I'll get something to cut it. I went inside the house, grabbed some scissors, and managed to cut off the collar. Seeing this situation, anger towards my brother-in-law surged within me. I never thought he would go this far. This is unbelievable. Mom, come live with us. The words slipped out before I could stop them. I couldn't leave my mother-in-law with my brother-in-law any longer. That's why I asked her to come to our house, but she said something I couldn't believe. You're no longer part of this family. What? You're not family anymore. You divorced Travis, but you still came all the way here today? What are you talking about? We haven't divorced. But Travis came here 5 days ago with David and told me you were getting divorced. He even had the divorce papers.
What? I have no memory of signing any divorce papers.
I couldn't understand what she was saying. Sure, my husband had been home for a week for the holidays, and I was busy with work, so we hadn't seen much of each other. But I had no idea he had done something like this during that time. I didn't understand why he would do such a thing. I felt a wave of sadness, and tears began to well up. Just then, I heard a car approaching, crossing the open gate. It was my brother-in-law's car. What are you doing untying that collar? Who gave you permission? How dare you come here after the divorce? If you still want to be involved with Mom, I won't go easy on you. My brother-in-law got out of the car, glaring at me with a menacing look. I felt a wave of fear, but steeled myself and showed him the photos I had taken. I took photos of the scene earlier. If I take these to the police, you'll be arrested. So what? Do it if you can. He slapped the phone out of my hand and began advancing on me. I felt it was the end. His grip was strong, and he squeezed my arm painfully. As I cried out, my mother-in-law tackled him to help me.
You scum, laying a hand on Travis's wife. What kind of person are you? You idiot.
As she said this, my brother-in-law turned his angry gaze on her and punched her in the face. She fell to the ground, teeth flying. He was panting with rage, but just then, a car pulled up from the entrance to the garden, and my husband and son got out, subduing him.
You finally hit someone, you scumbag. I won't forgive you.
My husband quickly restrained my brother-in-law and dragged him inside. We followed them inside, where my husband and son revealed shocking truths.
Thanks to the neighbors noticing something was wrong, we could get the car into the garden quickly. What were you doing, bro? Shut up, this has nothing to do with you. Why is Rebecca here anyway? If she hadn't come, no one would have found out about Mom being tied up in the garden. What? You tied her up in the yard? What are you thinking, doing this to your own mother? Shut up. It pisses me off, looking at her blank, clueless face.
The one who's clueless is you.
You've been a bum living at home since you graduated college.
As soon as we entered the house, their anger erupted, echoing through the house. My mother started crying at the scene, and my son protected her, standing by her side.
Wait a minute, I understand you both have things to say, but there's something I don't get. What's going on? Mom said I'm not family anymore, and you think I'm divorced. What's the truth here? I can't understand any of this.
I shouted louder than their yelling, causing them to momentarily fall silent and look at me. Then, my husband, looking guilty, explained everything. Since Dad died, Rebecca has been coming to the house to check on Mom, right? That made David start threatening me. He said if Rebecca kept coming, he'd take drastic measures. What do you mean? It was annoying. I couldn't vent my daily frustrations on Mom, so I took it out on you. So, I decided to torment Rebecca. But then I thought if I could manipulate Travis, maybe she'd disappear by getting divorced. At first, I was scared. He kept threatening to tie you up in the mountains or throw you into the sea if you came to the house again. I was tired of it. I even thought about going to the police with the evidence I had. But then he said if I didn't want that, I should divorce you, and I snapped. I talked to Nicholas about what David was doing, and he agreed to help. Hearing my husband, I finally understood his suspicious behavior. He was worried about me going to the house and was mentally affected by David's threats, and I felt somewhat relieved. But the story chilled me. David seriously thought about doing those things to me. Considering he was the kind of person who could tie his own mother to a doghouse, I shuddered at the thought he might actually follow through with his threats. I'm sorry for scaring you. I got real divorce papers, forged your signature, and took your stamp. I wanted to let him believe we were divorced. Wait. Didn't I go with you to file it at the city hall? How did it not go through? Divorce papers won't be accepted if they're forged. Dad knew that and went to explain everything. Before they could process it, we retrieved the papers.
You brat. I've always hated you. Your smart mouth irritates me. Do you think you're smart just because you went to a third-rate college? Nicholas is much smarter than you. Stop looking down on others.
Enraged by my husband's words, David grabbed my son's collar, ready to hit him. But my son calmly stopped him with legal talk.
According to the law, even if an assault doesn't result in injury, it can result in 1 year of imprisonment. You hit Grandma and broke her teeth. Under aggravated assault, causing injury can result in up to 15 years in prison, and it is a felony. I filmed your actions as evidence. If I report this to the police...
My son, unfazed by David's threats, spoke calmly, causing David to momentarily loosen his grip. Taking advantage of the moment, my son shook off David's hand and stood before him.
I decided to become a lawyer to protect Grandma. I studied hard for this. My knowledge is not half-baked like yours. Sorry, but you'll be punished for this.
David, overwhelmed by my son's determination, collapsed on the spot. Still, he tried to intimidate my husband and son by shouting.
Shut up. Why should I suffer? Mom's to blame for always doing the same things that annoys me. That day too.
Just as he began to speak, my mother-in-law, now calm, stood up. You think it's my fault? I've put up with your insults for so long, but I've had enough. Your attitude has always been so overbearing and scary that I couldn't do anything, but now I'm going to say everything. Not just about that fight, but all the terrible things you've done to me. How many awful things have you subjected me to? My sudden outburst left David stunned and speechless. I had always obeyed his commands quietly, but now, with strong allies to protect me, I began to unleash everything I had been holding back.
I don't know what you think you're capable of, but ever since you graduated from college, you've changed. You started looking down on me, criticizing every mistake I made. You complained about my housework, saying it wasn't good enough. When I let you try, you'd mess it up and hand it back to me. You act all superior without being able to do anything yourself. Let me be clear, you've been a useless bum living at home without a job. Whose money do you think you've been living off of? Mine and your father's. You have no right to act superior. Do you think we had no thoughts about you? No, even your father wanted to kick you out of the house.
She poured out her anger and past frustrations, tears streaming down her face as she confronted David. He refused to listen, staring at the floor as if he couldn't hear her. Fueled by rage, she marched up to him, grabbed his lowered head, and forced him to look at her. 3 nights ago, you started complaining to me as usual. You forced me out of the bath, saying, "Don't take so long in the bath, hurry up, I can't get in." I tried to keep it peaceful, but as soon as you got out, you started complaining again. Because you took so long, the water's cold now. What were you thinking? What if I catch a cold? What's your problem? Just because Dad's gone, you think you can bully Mom however you want. What's bothering you so much? Her cluelessness and clumsiness piss me off. If she didn't bother me, I wouldn't react, but she keeps saying weird things to me, which makes me even more irritated.
So you bully her because of that? That's not right.
Anyway, listen to the rest. We argued. For once, I was really mad. He dragged me out of the bath, threw me naked into the dressing room. I couldn't forgive him. Even though I wanted to keep things peaceful, we argued because he kept complaining after getting out of the bath. David went to his room, slammed the door, and I thought that was the end of it. But in the middle of the night, he put a dog collar around my neck, dragged me to the yard, and chained me up. I tried to remove the collar, but it was glued on, and the chain wouldn't come off either. So I've been in the yard since then, barely eating. Hearing this, my husband became even more furious. He grabbed a chair in front of him and raised it.
Wait, if you hit him, you'll end up in jail too, just like Nicholas said. If it means hitting someone who left Mom in the yard, I'd gladly do it. I might as well kill him.
My husband raised the chair with murderous intent. Realizing he was serious, David dodged. The chair broke apart on the floor. My husband still had part of the chair leg in his hand and was about to strike David's head when my son intervened.
You can't hit him and get charged with assault, Dad. The police will be here soon, so just hang on.
Ha, what are you talking about? The police are coming? Why?
Are you that stupid? The neighbors got suspicious the moment you tied Grandma up in the yard. They couldn't see what was going on inside the house or in the yard, so they were debating what to do. They were about to call the police when we happened to pass by. We asked them to hold off but to call if things got worse.
Thinking the police wouldn't come after all this is what's strange. I can't believe how much you hate Mom, David. Despite everything, David still didn't want to believe the police were coming, cursed at Mom, who had revealed the truth about 3 days ago, but my son restrained him and pinned him to the floor. You can't resist anymore. Keep running your mouth. It's already decided that you'll be arrested. Grandma, thank you for testifying about what happened 3 days ago. We recorded everything, so don't worry. As my son spoke kindly to her, I quickly displayed the photos on my phone. I also took pictures of you tied up, Mom. There'll be evidence too, right? My son nodded and gave a thumbs up, saying, yes, those will be solid evidence. My mother-in-law, feeling the weight lift, collapsed to her knees and began to cry. When Travis told me he was divorced, I was speechless. I'm so relieved it wasn't true. I always thought we should have kicked David out, but your father couldn't do it because he was our son. He wanted David to know the real world. He admitted he was too lenient and died regretting it. This incident would make him sad, but I think he'd forgive us. She cried, clinging to my husband until her tears dried up. When the police arrived, my son released David and handed him over. We provided all the evidence to the police, explaining my son was a law student and giving them the law firm's name he was interning with. If he makes any claims, our firm will handle it, he told them. With undeniable evidence, David was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Rumors spread quickly, making it to the local news, and even some national outlets picked up the story. A few reporters visited the house, bombarding my mother-in-law with questions. I never thought this would become a national news story. Reporters keep coming and asking questions. Why do I have to go through this? David's gone now, so just leave me alone. She complained to me whenever I visited. Mom, there's only you in this house now. Why don't you move in with us? It'd be safer for you. The reporters will eventually stop coming, but it's best to move now. She looked around the house wistfully, reminiscing about the past. You're right. Let's leave this house empty for now. It's still livable, so let's fix it up and rent it out. Is it hard to leave? A bit. My husband built this house, so it's sentimental, but it's too big for just me. If someone else can live here, that'd be best. Since everyone's here today, let's celebrate with a feast. She served a homemade, lavish meal. And my son and husband looked on happily. Mom seemed more vibrant than before. From then on, things moved quickly. We completed the move, leaving the in-laws' house vacant. One day, while my mother-in-law and I were at the old house for maintenance, making sure it was always ready for use, my son happened to visit and announced his engagement. In the course of the conversation, he asked if he could live in the in-laws' house.
I'd be happy if Nicholas lived in that house. Are you sure you want to?
Yeah. It's a precious house filled with memories of Grandma and Grandpa, and I want to take care of it. With that, my mother-in-law agreed, and the in-laws' house officially became my son's home. This ensured that the house would be inaccessible to David, who would be released in 12 years. We felt that all preparations were finally complete. It's sad for David, but after everything he did, we don't want him back. By the time he's released, he'll be in his 60s. He'll have to fend for himself. With this future concern resolved, we now live peacefully. David will be released in 12 years, but by then, we'll be in our late 50s. Nicholas will be in his 30s, an adult. We have nothing to fear from David. We focus on living our current happiness to the fullest. My mother-in-law lives by this motto every day. Inspired by her, I used the spacious land of the old house to create a garden and grow vegetables, fulfilling my dream. This has led to a fun and fulfilling life. My daughter, Jessica, is getting married, and we're heading to a meet and greet with both families. When we entered the designated room, Jessica's in-laws-to-be, John and Linda, were already seated. They seemed to have been talking about something, as their faces wore an eerily amused smile. I wondered what was so funny as I looked at the table, and saw that there were settings for 3 on our side. I realized this was a sly way of harassing us, and said to myself, I see. Please have a seat. Oh, it's just the 2 of you? We're a single-parent family. I lifted the corners of my eyes and replied as calmly as I could. But Linda still had a lingering smile. Right, I remember now. Maybe you should take this in a Tupperware? It must be tough being in a single-parent household. Linda covered her mouth with her hand, trying to suppress her laughter. Despite her harsh words, I didn't even bat an eyelid. Seeing this, Jessica tapped my shoulder. That's terrible. Mom, let's go home. Why's that? If it means you have to suffer, I'd rather not get married. Touched by my daughter's kindness, I smiled and firmly said, That's not necessary. Just wait a moment. Then, a female staff member came from behind with a takeaway box the size of a lunchbox, offering it to Linda with the words, Please, take this with you. John and Linda were taken aback, looking surprised.
If being low income is tough, please, take this.
What? My name is Emily Johnson. I'm in my 50s, feeling the midpoint of my life deeply as I live in a slightly spacious 3-bedroom house with my daughter, Jessica. When Jessica is at school, the emptiness of the living room feels lonely. During such times, I make it a routine to prepare 2 cups of tea. One for me, and the other for my late husband. Looking at the cup I poured for him, I feel comforted, thinking he might be here with me. He passed away from cancer about 20 years ago, just when we were about to start treatment. Just before he passed away, while lying in bed, he implored me about our only daughter, Jessica.
Please take good care of Jessica. She'll surely do great.
At that time, Jessica was too young to remember her father well. To keep my promise to my husband and not to let her feel lonely or hurt, I raised Jessica with all my might. Putting my needs second, I balanced work, house chores, and parenting, managing to send her to college even as a single parent. I might be biased, but Jessica turned out to be a beautiful, kind, and hardworking woman, excelling in her studies. She's my pride and joy. After graduating, she got a job at a corporation and started living on her own.
I can't always rely on you, Mom. I'll start repaying you back, bit by bit. Don't worry about me. Just do your best. Eat properly, don't stay up late, and remember, I'm not a kid anymore, I'll be fine. What are you saying? You'll always be my precious child.
On the eve of her move, Jessica and I talked about the past, the future, and her father until late into the night. We never ran out of memories to share, losing track of time. Even after she started living alone, my smartphone would frequently light up with her messages. From the struggles of unpacking and cooking, to her experiences at work and stories about her colleagues. Every message made me feel as if she was right there with me. Jessica must be feeling lonely in her first time living alone. But after half a year, the messages from her gradually became less frequent, changing from every 3 days to once a week. She's really doing her best. There's a saying that the absence of reliance is a good reliance. The lack of messages probably means that Jessica's days are fulfilling. Thinking this, even the tea I made for my husband seems to nod in agreement. When about 1.5 years had passed since Jessica started her job, on a warm, late autumn day, I received a call. It was Jessica, and as I answered, wondering what was up, she sounded excited, saying, "It's been a while. Mom, listen, I want you to meet someone this Sunday. Are you free?" "Oh, it's been a while indeed. I'm free this Sunday." "Great, I'll come home around noon, okay?" "Sure, that's fine. Be careful on your way."
It's been a long time since I've seen you, Mom. You're gonna be surprised, see you then.
After saying that, Jessica hung up, and I was left in silence. I wondered when was the last time I had a phone conversation with her. Her unusually happy tone also caught my attention, but when Sunday came, I was indeed surprised, just like Jessica said. At the door, Jessica appeared with a young man named Ethan Parker. He wasn't dressed casually but in a neat, casual suit, looking a bit tense. "Nice to meet you. I'm Ethan Parker, dating Jessica." He introduces himself, tall and slender, with a face as handsome as a model's. He gave the impression of a polite and good young man.
"Oh, Jessica has been in your care. Please come in."
I offered him guest slippers and invited them to the living room. As I made tea and we sat at the table, Jessica shared her recent news and introduced him. Then, blushing, she said,
"The reason I wanted you to meet him is, I want to marry Ethan." Marry!
Though I had a hunch, it still struck a chord to hear that Jessica had found someone. I maintained my composure and looked at Ethan, who now seemed more serious than before.
"Yes, I proposed to Jessica recently. And we wanted to meet with you, her mother."
After a brief silence, I said, "I see."
I didn't know Jessica had such a wonderful person in her life. "Ethan, Jessica grew up without a father. I raised her all by myself."
"Yes, Jessica told me she was raised by a single mother."
Jessica is my treasure, my only daughter. Will you truly protect and make her happy? Of course. I'm confident I can make her happier than anyone else in this world.
Ethan responded confidently, not intimidated by my demeanor. Had he faltered here, I might not have consented to their marriage.
I understand. Please take good care of Jessica.
When I said this, the two exchanged relieved glances and smiled happily. Seeing them like this, I naturally found myself smiling as well. I think he would have smiled in the same way if he were here. A few months after sending off a happy Jessica and Ethan, Jessica took a long break and came home. She happily talked about her work and Ethan, but occasionally, she would have a troubled expression, which worried me. When asked, she would avoid the topic and say,
"It's nothing, Mom."
Jessica has a habit of shrugging her shoulders when she wants to talk about something or is lying. She shrugged this time too, so I was sure something was bothering her. "Hey, Jessica, how about we visit that new cafe that just opened? This one here." I pointed to the cafe on my smartphone screen. Her eyes lit up.
"Oh, I've been wanting to go there. They're known for their original coffee. It's popular at work too."
Then it's settled. The next day, Jessica and I walked to the cafe in the cool air. It was deep into winter, and the brown fallen leaves crunched under our feet. We ordered coffee to go and walked for a while.
"Mom, thanks for accepting Ethan and me."
He seemed sincere. Take good care of each other. When we reached a large park, Jessica started to open up.
"Actually, I went to greet Ethan's parents. They didn't seem to think much of me."
Her story went back a month. She had gone with Ethan to greet his parents, John and Linda. But they seemed skeptical of her from the start.
"Hello, I'm Jessica Johnson. I'm dating Ethan."
"Ethan, are you sure about this girl?" Linda interrupted Jessica's greeting.
"What do you mean?"
"Just look at her. She looks poor, her clothes, her makeup. She's not a match for Ethan." Instead of congratulations, they openly criticized Jessica.
"Mom, that's rude. How can you say that about my girlfriend?"
"You think so too, right?" Linda even sought agreement from John, who simply nodded in affirmation. "Oh, is your family very poor? Do your parents work?"
"My mother works, and my father passed away when I was young."
"A single mother?" "I thought as much." John seemed oddly satisfied and scoffed.
"Dad? It must be for the money. Ethan, our family is of a distinguished lineage. You shouldn't be with this kind of woman." "How can you say that? Jessica is different. I know her better than anyone."
"You're just naive.
There are plenty of people who would marry for our wealth."
Shockingly, John even suggested introducing Ethan to a daughter of an acquaintance. Linda agreed and seemed pleased with the idea.
"That's a good idea. After all, this girl's father works for a major listed company. She's not a match for a single-parent family."
"You think so too, right, Ethan?" Seeing his mother happily agree, Ethan raised his voice.
"Enough, both of you."
That day, the conversation went nowhere, and Ethan had to lead Jessica away from his parents' house. Later, Ethan told Jessica that both John and Linda had a strong sense of elitism.
"Jessica, I'm really sorry. My parents said such awful things and hurt you."
He apologized repeatedly and promised to always protect her. Listening to this on a park bench, I was struggling to contain my anger.
"So, what did his parents say about the marriage?" "We went again last week, and despite their sarcasm, Ethan convinced them to accept us." "Are you okay with that?"
Jessica bit her lip and shrugged.
"Yeah, I'm okay. We won't be living together, and I can handle it."
"All right." It was clear that the relationship between the Parkers and Jessica was strained. Even with Ethan's promise to protect her, there would be limits. Knowing the difficulties ahead, I wished I could advise her to reconsider the marriage. However, having already given my consent, that was no longer an option. Even in just this short period since the greeting, Jessica looked so downcast. The thought of her having to wear that sad expression for the foreseeable future was unbearable.
About the meeting between both families, I think maybe I shouldn't attend. Why? Because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. I'd rather not have the meeting if it's going to upset you.
Until then, Jessica had been acting bravely, but now her eyes seemed to well up. Though she didn't cry, she was evidently trying to spare me from the same unpleasant feelings. Her kindness pained me, but I smiled.
Don't worry about me. Let's have the meeting properly, so your marriage is recognized by everyone.
Under the cold sky, Jessica and I sipped our cold coffee on our way back home. When Jessica told Ethan about wanting to go ahead with the meeting, he seemed very surprised and worried about her. "You don't have to push yourself," he said.
I'm fine. Mom doesn't mind either. If that's what you want, I'll talk to my parents about it.
On the day of the meeting, Jessica and I went to the venue. We were silent, but I decided to face the situation with my head held high and my chest puffed out. We took a taxi to the designated famous hotel, taking deep breaths at the entrance. However, Jessica was still anxious. When the hotel was chosen, Linda had made a snide remark, adding to Jessica's unease.
That famous hotel featured in commercials. I know it's a place unfamiliar to your family.
Such unnecessary comments should have been brushed off, but Jessica took them to heart and completely shrank into herself. I gently embraced Jessica's shoulder, signaling with my eyes, "It's going to be okay," and we started walking together. At the entrance, Ethan, who seemed to have arrived earlier, was waiting for the elevator.
Thank you for adjusting your schedules to meet today.
Ethan looked much more nervous than the last time we met, sweating even in the cold of winter.
No, thank you. We appreciate your efforts today. Well, you might have heard from Jessica, but this hotel is where my father works, and...
Ethan stuttered, clearly worried his parents might say something offensive. Given their attitude towards Jessica, I expected they would treat me the same. I replied with confidence.
Yes, I am aware. There's no need to worry. Besides, you look more handsome when you're confident.
Ethan looked up sharply, just as the elevator doors opened, and an announcement indicated we should proceed upstairs. We stepped in and rode up to the designated floor. Entering the assigned room, John and Linda were already seated, smirking in a way that seemed both creepy and amused. Glancing at the table, I noticed that only 3 sets of dishes were prepared on our side. I immediately understood this subtle form of harassment. "Oh, we've been waiting for you. Please take a seat."
"Oh? Just the 2 of you? We are a single-parent family,"
I replied, lifting the corners of my eyes, trying to stay calm. But Linda's smile turned into a sneer. "Oh, right. Why don't you take this home in a container? You must be poor."
Single mothers must have such low incomes, always hungry, right?
That's right.
The income of single-parent families is well known to be low.
Linda covered her mouth with her hand, barely holding back her laughter. Despite the shocking comments, I remained unmoved. Seeing this, Ethan couldn't help but cry out.
Dad, Mom, stop it right now. This is too disrespectful.
At that moment, Jessica tapped my shoulder.
This is terrible. Mom, let's go. Why? If it means my mom, who sacrificed everything for me, has to suffer like this, I don't want to get married.
Hearing this, Ethan turned around in shock.
Jessica!
I looked at them and said firmly.
That's not necessary. Just wait a moment.
Then, a female staff member approached from behind with a lunchbox-sized pack and offered it to Linda. Please, take this to go. Linda and John were taken aback, looking utterly confused. If you're concerned about low incomes, please, take this. What? At least Mrs. Johnson here is far from being poor. The staff member, speaking clearly, placed the pack down and stepped back gracefully. Linda and John were indignant. You. How dare you do this?
That's right. You're fired, fired. Right, dear? Both of you, please calm down. She's an old friend of mine. The rude ones here are you too.
The woman turned to me, smiled briefly, and said,
The division head is always so busy.
Division head! Linda and John's reactions were comically exaggerated, almost tumbling off their chairs. John was sweating profusely, not just on his forehead but all over his face. I hadn't intended to hide it, but I am the daughter of the president of the group company that owns this famous hotel. I have worked for this company for many years, continuing even after marriage. When I was pregnant with Jessica, I took maternity leave like any other employee and raised her while working in place of my husband. By the time Jessica entered college, my efforts were recognized, and I was promoted to division head, thanks to recommendations from colleagues, but this couple was unaware of it.
Are both of you listening?
I addressed the two lying on the floor with a firm voice.
Today, we came here to discuss the marriage between my dear daughter and your son, Ethan. It seems you have spoken very poorly of my daughter.
I glared at them, causing John and Linda to shudder.
I replaced my husband, who passed away from illness when my daughter was young, working hard to provide her with both love and education.
Ethan swallowed nervously.
I trust my daughter and the person she has chosen. Even if they come from a family that judges others by income and behaves rudely, I see Ethan as a respectful and fine young man, an important addition to our family.
I paused for a breath before continuing.
I believe you too care for your child. So, I ask again, do you accept the marriage of my daughter and Ethan?
The room fell silent. John and Linda were trembling, and Ethan seemed to hold his breath. Jessica had never seen this side of me before. She was speechless behind me.
Well?
Linda looked resentfully at John. He, pale-faced, adjusted his posture and hurriedly said,
Of course, division head. We look forward to a close relationship in the future. I am here today not as a division head, but as Jessica's mother.
I firmly stated, looking at John.
And if we talk about work, aren't you soon to leave this place? What do you mean?
I had already investigated John's reputation within the company. When Jessica told me Ethan's father was John Parker, the name rang a bell. His disdainful attitude towards Jessica and being a hotel employee was a dead giveaway. He had a bad reputation in the hotel, and I had often heard about John's high-handed behavior towards his subordinates. Additionally, he was reported to be absent from work under the pretext of meetings, and a personnel hearing was imminent.
That's why you should really reflect on your own actions,
I told the speechless John. Linda suddenly stood up, her face red with rage, and lunged at me with a wild scream. But when I easily dodged, she fell over with a groan, like a squashed frog. To Linda, who was sprawled on the floor, I delivered a final warning.
Also, know this, if you ever interfere with Jessica and Ethan's happiness, I won't stay silent.
After pinning down the helpless couple, I urged Jessica and Ethan to leave with me. Of course, I left their handling to my childhood friend. Half a year passed, and it was now summer. The sticky humidity was tough to bear, especially in my 50s. The weather forecast promised another day of intense heat, making an umbrella essential outdoors. As I walked to the supermarket, I thought about what happened afterward. After the meeting, Ethan had apologized to Jessica and me several times.
I'm really sorry for my parents' disrespectful behavior.
He was so apologetic he even bowed to the floor, prompting me to quickly lift him up.
You don't need to go that far. Your sincerity is apparent. It's just so embarrassing. I don't want anything to do with such parents anymore. But they are the ones who raised you, aren't they? No, my aunt and uncle raised me. My parents left me with them until I went to college.
I had always wondered why Ethan's character was so different from his parents' arrogance. It turns out his aunt and uncle, who raised him, were decent people. Recently, Ethan formally cut ties with his parents after they came begging for money. After the meeting, Linda called Ethan in a panic.
Ethan, your dad lost his job. They said it was due to job negligence.
But Ethan responded indifferently.
That's tough. Don't talk like it's someone else's problem. We're out of money, you need to send us some.
Mom, I know about it. Uncle told me, you have a spending habit, right?
What are you talking about?
If you could just get rid of that habit, wouldn't our lives be more comfortable? Please stop relying on me. That guy, always saying unnecessary things. After that, there were several more phone calls. Linda had exhausted her savings because of her spending habit, and even John's retirement fund was running low. Struggling financially, Linda and John were not only asking for money but also insisted on speaking to the division manager. They kept calling all the time, morning, noon, and night, so eventually, Ethan's patience ran out.
Both of you, just stop it. I don't want to cause trouble for my wife or mother-in-law.
Saying that, he abruptly ended the call and blocked their numbers. Not only that, Ethan changed his cell phone number and moved to a new apartment with Jessica, changing their address. Of course, he didn't tell his parents, so John and Linda had no way of knowing what happened to Ethan and Jessica afterwards. This removed any disturbances in the couple's happy married life. From what Jessica told me, since then, they have been living peaceful days together. As for me, I've managed to build a good relationship with the newlyweds, having meals together 2 or 3 times a month. Also, this incident made me realize a big misunderstanding. I had been working hard to ensure Jessica didn't face hardships, raising her on my own, but in doing so, I had completely stopped going on trips, which was my hobby. Jessica thought she was the reason I gave up my hobby. My efforts to spare Jessica any worry or hardship ended up making her worried about me.
Don't worry about me from now on. I want you to spend time and money for yourself, Mom.
Until Jessica said that, I was enjoying living alone at home, but since then, I started going on trips on weekends. I, who loved domestic travel, started visiting places I wanted to see and places with fond memories. Strangely enough, as I worked hard in my daily job, I began to feel it's okay to spend time and money on myself. Moreover, exploring recent lodging facilities has even benefited my work. Projects have been progressing more smoothly, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Thinking of this as thanks to Jessica, I finished paying at the store and left. Today's shopping was also for ingredients to cook dinner together with the 3 of us. Looking up, I saw Jessica coming from the opposite side.
Mom, are you okay? Don't overdo it, let me carry that for you.
Jessica hurried over and easily lifted the shopping bag in my right hand. Oh, thank you. Shall we go then? Yeah, Ethan's gonna come right after he finishes work. He's been looking forward to your summer vegetable curry. Jessica said, smiling sweetly. I'll have to make plenty then. Recently, there was happy news. Jessica is pregnant. This made not only me and Ethan happy, but Jessica as well. I'm secretly planning to send clothes and toys for the grandchild, keeping it a surprise for the 2. Though I wonder if it's too early, I know the child will be here before we know it. I'm already eagerly awaiting the day I can meet this new life. I'm Mary, 42 years old. 10 years ago, I married a man I met at work. He was divorced with a child, whom I've raised as my own while working. During this time, my husband started his own business and, despite many ups and downs, persevered as the president until the end. My stepson turned 20 this year. He left home 2 years ago to attend a university in a neighboring state and seems to be managing well living alone. But our ordinary life changed abruptly. My husband passed away. He died of a heart attack, and there was nothing that could be done. While I was overwhelmed with grief, there were countless things to take care of, including the funeral and various arrangements, and before I knew it, the day of the funeral arrived. The funeral was a small, family-only affair, as my husband wished. His parents had already passed away, and being an only child, the only family he had by blood was our son. My parents and siblings didn't get along with my husband, so we didn't invite them. It was just me and our son at the very small funeral. Before the coffin was taken away, my son came to me in the waiting room. "What's wrong?" I asked him as usual, but he didn't respond. His expression was almost blank. When I asked again, he suddenly started saying incomprehensible things.
That's enough, you parasite.
What?
Stop clinging to Dad. You just came in later and started sucking up all his money. You fake mother parasite, just renounce your inheritance and disappear. The real family is just me.
After saying that, he left the room, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed painfully in my heart. After that, we didn't talk, and as soon as the funeral was over, he went back to his dorm. I couldn't ask him what he meant by his words. I tried to contact him, but my messages were left unread, and he ignored my calls. I couldn't confirm anything, and it was already the next day. Today, I tried contacting him several times, but still no response. And with work tomorrow, it's difficult to just leave for his dorm in the neighboring state. So, I stopped by a convenience store to pick up some light food and drinks, then headed home. When I entered my apartment, I noticed a sliver of light under the door to the living room. Hesitantly, I approached and opened the door quietly. To my surprise, there was my son, sitting on the living room sofa, seemingly waiting for me. "What are you doing here?" After moving out for his dorm, my son only came home for the holidays, like Christmas and New Year's. Even during the recent wake and funeral, he didn't stop by here, he just went straight from his dorm and back. Ignoring my obvious confusion, my son confronted me in a calm voice, or rather, a slightly mocking tone.
Was something inconvenient for you? Didn't want to be seen doing whatever you please now that Dad's gone?
What do you mean?
Just figured you'd be living it up in your own way now that Dad's not around.
In many ways. That's not true at all. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, that's not important. Did you eat? Huh? Are you hungry? If you haven't eaten, I can make something simple. It was getting late. If he had been waiting in the room alone, he might be hungry. As a mother, it was natural for me to offer, but it seemed to irritate him. Suddenly, he slammed his hand on the table in front of him and glared at me with hostility.
You! Didn't I just say it?
What?
How long are you gonna keep shamelessly squatting in this house? You fake mother parasite, just renounce your inheritance and disappear. The real family is just me.
The same lines, the same insults as before, came flying out from my son. What's really going on? Did something happen?
What? I only put up with you because Dad was around. Who would think of someone like you as my mother? You just leeched off Dad while he was the CEO, sucking up the sweet life. Just get lost now.
I was at a loss for words. Indeed, since remarrying 10 years ago, my son hardly ever turned to me for affection. He grew up protected by his kind father, having experienced his parents' divorce at a young age. I felt that my presence had robbed him of his gentle father. So, for the past 10 years, I tried my best to raise him. I made daily lunches, took him to and from extracurricular activities, and created many family-like moments. Even during his rebellious phase, my husband struggled with all sorts of things, but we faced it together, believing it was a phase every child goes through. But it seems my efforts never reached him. My son's painful words inflicted deep damage on my heart. I painfully realized that our relationship was only possible because of the presence of my husband, his blood father, and my husband. My son, openly hostile towards me. This is probably the real face of my son. Perhaps, no matter what I say as his stepmother, it won't reach him anymore. So, I decided to at least listen to his last wish.
Yes. No matter what happens, you gotta keep living. Absolutely. Huh? Don't you act all high and mighty, you fake.
The words from my son, filled with such intensity, felt like they were piercing through me. What do you want? Get out of here. What?
This house belonged to Dad, which means it's now mine. No place for a fake family like you.
Kevin.
Shut up. Don't talk to me. Don't even say my name. I really want to tell you to get out right now. But I'm kind because you did take care of me when I was a kid. I'll give you a week's notice. This is my house, I can't live in that tiny apartment forever. Just hand over the place and get lost.
The last look my son gave me left deep wounds in my heart. With that, he left for his dorm. A week later. After work, I checked my personal phone and saw an unbelievable number of missed calls and messages. Most of them were from Kevin, just as I expected. I turned off my phone for a while and headed home. After a quick dinner and a bath, I turned my phone back on after a few hours. As soon as I did, the sound of countless messages and missed call notifications wouldn't stop. I tried to go through them, and the moment I marked the messages as read, Kevin called, as if he had been waiting. Hello?
Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing? Don't mess with me.
I could hear my son's anger through the phone. It wasn't surprising. The first message had come in the morning.
Calm down first. I can't talk to you if you don't speak properly. What? You're the one making it impossible to talk properly. What's this about the house being up for sale?
So, it was about that. Not really surprising.
How about we meet and talk? Where are you?
Outside the house. I see. So, you saw the for sale sign and started bombarding me with calls. Makes sense.
Of course.
He must have been there since the morning. Well, there's nowhere else for him to be, I guess. For now, you can still get into the house. If you have the key, go in and wait. It's completely empty, though.
What? The key still works?
He hadn't even tried it. I suddenly remembered my husband, who had a simple and slow-witted side, just like my son Kevin. He must have tried the key after I suggested it. I could hear the sound of the door opening through the phone. He probably stepped into the entrance, relieved and slightly relaxed, judging by the deep breath I heard. Yet, he couldn't hide his emotions or embarrassment, and his voice came out harshly.
Just hurry up and get here.
The call abruptly ended, and I let out a heavy sigh. In the midst of my hectic daily life, having just relaxed at home, honestly, going out was a hassle. There were still a mountain of things to do. But I knew I had to have a proper conversation with my son, for various reasons. Resigned to this, I put my coat back on and headed to my former home. As I opened the unlocked door, I saw the cold hallway leading to the lit living room. Walking quietly over the chilly floor, I found Kevin sitting cross-legged in the middle of the empty living room.
You're late. How long do you expect people to wait?
What? I came right after the phone call ended. My stronger tone surprised Kevin a bit. But ever since we met, he was always biting back, not just at me, but also at his biological father, my husband. He wasn't going to back down now and lashed out even more.
Are you kidding me? What's with the for sale sign?
The house is too big for one person, so I thought about selling it. Your words helped me make up my mind. Thanks for that. The cold floor of winter was draining the warmth from my body. I turned on the air conditioner as I always did.
What? You can't just sell Dad's house.
Oh. But this is my house. What? This house is mine, legally in my name. What? You didn't know?
Don't lie to me. How could you afford a place like this? You think I'm stupid just because I'm young?
No, wasn't it you who treated me with a condescending attitude? Of course, I wouldn't say that out loud. No, it's legally in my name. I can show you the registration if you want. His real thoughts spilled out as I spoke with deliberate firmness. How can someone with no money like you afford it? You must have tricked Dad into giving you the money. Just like you wormed your way into his life for his money when he was a CEO. I knew it. Even though my husband and I tried desperately to connect, Kevin never opened up his heart. Correctly speaking, my husband became a president after we got married. But it's true Kevin probably thought some random woman was approaching his father, who could earn enough to start a company. But that doesn't change the fact that you, his son, were freely spending his money, right? What? You thought I didn't know? You sneaked into Dad's company and stole money during your middle and high school years, didn't you? Kevin's face stiffened, not expecting me to know. In reality, it was Kevin, not me, who was siphoning off his father's money. How do you know that? I didn't at first. Your father was desperately hiding it to protect you. But eventually, there were accounting issues, and when pressed, your father admitted, Kevin has been coming to the company and taking money. Dad knew? Of course he knew. How much do you think you took from Dad's company? How would I know? $400,000.
What?
And I think you probably took a few thousand more. Kevin probably didn't even realize he had stolen that much. Seriously? He muttered, shaking his foot slightly. No point asking what he spent it on now. By the way, aren't you wondering how I know all this? Yeah. How do you know so much about Dad's company? You must have been up to no good. The nerve of this kid, accusing me of wrongdoing. It's only natural I know. It's my company. What? That company is mine, so of course I know about it.
No way. That was Dad's company. Don't tell me you took over it.
I wouldn't take over such a small company that was in huge debt. Debt? Yes. Dad's company was on the brink of collapse, so we included it under our group to turn it around. That's why you could go to college and still ask Dad for money. You should be thanking me. What? Dad was indeed the president since he went independent 8 years ago. But eventually, he became an employed president under our group. Like a salaried president. Why? Like I said, the company was in huge debt and had no way out, so we took it under our wing. But why? Your father had no business acumen. He thought he could handle it even after you stole $400,000 from him. That's impossible for that company. It couldn't make up for a $400,000 loss. So, we took it under our group. Dad cut his salary to pay employees, and I paid for all our living expenses and this apartment, which I owned, to reduce the burden. As I spoke calmly, Kevin's reaction was surprisingly mild, beyond his stiffened expression. He seemed unable to keep up with the facts spilling from my mouth. What do you mean, you already owned it? Oh, I've been investing in various things since I was young. I owned several apartments, including this one, which I bought to rent out. When we were looking for a new place to live, I thought it would be suitable for our family. You own several apartments? Yes, real estate income. How did you have money to invest when you were young? Well, who are you, anyway? After living together for 10 years, he's finally asking. He always thought of me as just an ordinary office worker. Lack of interest is a scary thing. Living life ignoring what should be seen and known. Even the most important things, like your own family. My efforts at parenting were one-sided after all. It wasn't just Kevin's fault. The trauma of divorce in his early years, the appearance of a stepmother he couldn't accept, being tossed around by the whims of adults, these are undeniable facts. But neither my husband nor I could find the answer to what to do. We were either not allowed to find it, or we were not allowed to find it. Now, it's just a result. I need to explain this to Kevin too. I calmly laid out the facts to the suspicious Kevin. Do you know Turner Group? I'm the COO there. What? The Turner Group? Remember my maiden name? Ah. Right, Mary Turner. Daughter of the CEO of Turner Group, the heir to the Turner family.
No way. I've never met your family.
That's because your father avoided them. He didn't want to face them after running off with the heir to the Turner family, a divorced man. So, he avoided any meetings.
What?
And then, we had to include his failing company under our group's umbrella. Without even apologizing. That's probably why he lacked business skills. My husband indeed spent his last days running from the Turner family. My family wanted to meet him, but he never did until the end. That's why they weren't invited to the funeral. He was a kind man. Truly kind man. But that kindness also became a source of indulgence and escape. Then that means I'm the grandson of the Turner Group, right? That's true, isn't it? I expected you'd say that. That's why I never told Kevin this truth until now. I thought about telling him when he was in high school, but at that time, it wasn't something he could handle. He would definitely take advantage of the Turner name. In that sense, my husband keeping us distant from my family was a blessing in disguise. Kevin's recent words just confirmed it all. But sadly, you're not the grandson of the Turner Group.
What? If you're my mother, then I'm the grandson. Even if you're a fake mother, that's what the family register says. Don't try to deceive me.
Did you listen to what I said before? What? What did I say? I wonder if the son in front of me remembers. He looks confused, trying to recall, but it seems nothing came to mind. After you said, the only real family is me, I said, no matter what, you have to keep living. Absolutely. Kevin seemed to remember that, but still had a face that said, so what? Clearly, my words and intentions hadn't reached him. His expression confirmed it. You're 20 years old, you should understand the meaning, right? What? You're an adult and a college student, living a life beyond most adults, without thinking about anything?
What? It's normal for parents to support while kids are students.
There's no obligation to support beyond tuition and basic living expenses. What? Parents don't have to pay for your leisure and luxury. At my words, Kevin quickly hid his expensive-looking watch. Surely, there are many other things he obtained with the over $400,000 he used. For a student who doesn't work, they're all disproportionate. Such disproportionate armor is fragile and protects nothing. You're okay with your child being homeless? I don't mind. It's none of my concern anymore. What? You're no longer my concern. Kevin looked at me, his face saying he didn't understand. I've never really understood you, Kevin. From the day your father brought you until today, I couldn't strip away that inappropriate, fragile armor with a direct approach. Your father has passed away. So, we're no longer parent and child. What? I divorced your father after his death, and my last name is back to Turner. You and I are now complete strangers. Well, we've always been strangers, actually.
Why would you do something like that?
Why? You said it yourself. The only real family is you. You never thought of me as family from the start. It worked out perfectly.
That's not true. What am I supposed to do without parent?
I wasn't your family, remember? You said it yourself.
But you should have consulted me.
Consult? To someone who never listened even when I tried to connect? To someone who left and never came back, doing whatever he pleased? Besides, we're not family, so why should I consult you? I smiled sweetly at Kevin, his face turning red and his body trembling. It might be immature. But after these 10 years of looking at him as family, maintaining this relationship of stepmother and child seemed too hard. Suffering under a kind yet indulgent husband and a son who wouldn't accept me as family. I've grown tired over these 10 years. What about college and a place to live? Didn't I already point that out? What? No matter what happens, carry on. Absolutely. You demanded that I renounce my inheritance, so you must have thought about it, right? What? The inheritance. What happened to it? Sadly, your father left debts. Consumer loans, credit card loans, about $600,000. And no savings. What? Debts and no savings? Of course, as you demanded, I renounced the inheritance, so all the dead inheritance goes to you. Good luck.
What? I'm not inheriting any debts. Why are there debts and no savings?
Because you stole from his company, remember? What? I said earlier, besides that $400,000, and there were probably more. Kevin nods slightly. That was probably used to cover the hole in your father's savings and debts. What? Probably at first, he was trying to cover it up without creating a hole in the company's funds. The company had just started, and there wasn't much savings. Once that ran out, and he couldn't borrow anymore, he struggled for years, trying to deceive, and eventually came crying to me. You had already consumed what should have been your father's inheritance. It's your own doing, isn't it? I wonder if my words reached him. His eyes bloodshot and round, Kevin mutters to himself, exuding an aura of despair. How much is the debt? It was less than $100,000, I think. $100,000? Kevin sat down, holding his head. I'll give you a hint, though. A hint? A hint that might help you survive. What is it? Tell me, quickly. You know, you're asking for a favor. Maybe think about how you ask? Sorry, please tell me. Like I did, you can renounce the inheritance too. Really? His face brightened up, persistently asking how to do it. You can do the procedure yourself if you look it up. Besides, you're a law student, right? Oh wait, you barely got into a decent private university with a recommendation from a low-ranking high school and you're struggling to pass, right? You're technically a junior but haven't even earned 40 credits yet? It makes sense you don't know. I hit a sore spot and he looked down, biting his lip. He might think of me as a mean adult, but it's intentional. He probably hasn't been attending school properly. Less than 40 credits in 3 years. It'll take at least 3 more years to graduate, right? That means 2 more years of tuition. It's far beyond what he could possibly afford to pay. There's some life insurance in your name from your father. Really? It's only $60,000. Seeing Kevin's reaction, as if he wanted to exclaim, "Is that all?" I mentioned that it's also due to his actions that there wasn't more money for insurance, causing him to make an uncomfortable face. And you know, there might be taxes on the insurance money, so look into that.
What? Taxes on insurance money?
You're an adult, so maybe look it up? Even after taxes, it should be enough to set up a room and live for a while. If you want to continue college, apply for scholarships. Wait, set up a room? What do you mean? The apartment you're living in now. I'm canceling it at the end of this month. What? Why? It's rented under my name. I have no obligation to keep renting and paying for someone who's not my child. Can't you give me like a month's notice? What? You only gave me a week's notice. You have 3 more weeks. You're 20, an adult. You can rent a room and do anything. I'm just following through on your words. Take responsibility for what you said.
This can't be happening.
He looked to Pirate. But from my perspective, there's much more he could do. I wish he'd realized this. First off, why not sell those inappropriate branded items for cash? What? Like that watch you're wearing, and that bag. Do you really need them right now? I want him to think and struggle to find answers. Kevin, who has grown up indulged in his father's unconditional kindness since his mother wasn't around. He might have been awkwardly showing his neediness to me too. But there's a difference between acceptable neediness and harmful self-indulgence. Actions that hurt others and change lives are not neediness but mere selfishness. It's clear that a 20-year-old adult like him will struggle in life if this continues. I don't hate Kevin. In fact, I still think of him as my dear son. That's why I cut ties with him with the greatest love I could offer. He needs to strive on his own now. I left an envelope with necessary documents in front of the still stunned Kevin. I'm sure he will understand. With that hope, I softly stroked his hair for the first time in years and quietly left the former home. 3 years have passed since my husband's death. Every year on his anniversary, I visit his grave and update him. There, I always find beautiful blue gentians laid out. The person who offers flowers to my husband, who had no siblings or parents. I'm sure it must be the person I have in mind. The meaning of the gentian flower is consoling sorrow. Blue gentians symbolize sincerity. The same color as my husband's favorite tie. It's out of season to get these flowers now. I wonder what he thinks and where he gets them. Every year, I lay white gentians next to the blue ones. Their meaning is sincere character. Like my straightforward, kind husband, watching over Kevin from afar. After finishing my visit, I returned to the office. Even now, after 3 years, I continue my daily life as the COO of Turner Group. COO, please check this. What's this? It's the list of new employees joining our group companies next year. Oh, it's already that time of year, isn't it? Every year around this time, the list of new employees joining the group companies is brought to me. With so many companies, the list is quite long, but it's my personal wish to remember the faces and names of the young people who will be working with us. As I was flipping through the list handed over by my secretary, I came across the list from the company where my husband used to be the president. The current president of that company is really unique and capable, isn't he? You knew him from college, right? The secretary approached with a mug of coffee. Its gentle aroma tickled my nose. Yes, he's been a friend since college. He did great in another company, so I lured him over to lead. It was a great success. The company has shown significant growth since then. After my husband's sudden passing, I had to look for a new president. Given the tough business conditions, it was hard to find suitable staff. That meant there was no one suitable within the company either, leading to a tough situation. So I managed to persuade a friend of mine, who had joined a venture company with only a few employees, to join as the new president, and had grown the company to a scale of 100 employees. The existing employees were initially puzzled by the completely different approach of the new president. However, his personality and power led the team, and he continues to elevate the company. I was curious about the new employees he had chosen. As I flipped through the list, I saw a familiar face. It was Kevin. What's this about? I called my friend immediately. Hello. Hey, I didn't hear about this. About what? The new employees starting in April. Oh, were you surprised? He seemed to know what I was talking about. Surprised? Why is he there? Why? Because he's interesting. What? He is quite interesting. His life until 3 years ago was quite heavy, but these last 3 years have amplified his character. I have only high expectations. Listening to my friend, I stared at Kevin's photo on the list. His face had changed significantly, looking much more mature. The expression he had when I last stroked his hair was nowhere to be seen. Okay. Take care of him. Like you have to tell me. The call was abruptly ended. Even though he says that, I know he's watching over Kevin. That's good. I thought to myself, feeling relieved. I might never meet Kevin directly, but I'm sure I'll hear about him often. I can't feel the softness of his hair, but I gently stroke his photo on the paper and smile softly.